afternoon. My name is Don Bebel. I'm with Steris Corporation. I'm the Engineered Products Account Manager with the responsibility for the state of Utah. Today we're going to be performing operator training on the Reliance 400 series of glassware washer. And before I begin this in-service, this training session may not completely disclose all knowledge, data, details, or information which Steris Corporation provides to the owner and to the owner's operators through other sources of information, including but not limited to the operator and owner's manuals provided with the equipment. The information conveyed in this training session and in any video or audio recording of same does not constitute completely safety training with regards to the equipment, and that owner's operators shall be provided with training on and have access to the operators and service manuals. So with that being said, I'd like to start off by just introducing you to the washer. The Reliance 400 series of glassware washer is designed for the washing and processing of instruments, glassware, items that are used in general purpose laboratory use with a variety of different accessory header systems, as we call them. In this case, each of these spindle headers is designed for specific types of glassware. We name our accessory headers by the name of spindles that are on each of these headers. In this case, this is what we would refer to as an M8 spindle header. It's designed for processing of larger glassware. In this next case, this is what we call our M18 series of spindle header. It's designed to process some of your medium-sized glassware. And if you refer to the operator's manual, in the back of the manual there is a diagram that will give you an indication of what each of the accessory headers is designed to process. So just refer to your operator's manual for a complete listing and choosing the right kind of accessory header for the type of glassware you're going to be processing. It's very important that folks that are going to be using this washer become familiar with the operator's manual, paying particular attention to the safety precautions as they begin in section number 1 of the operator's manual. Because you are going to be working around equipment that's going to be hot, you're going to have it's a wet environment. There is a door that's going to be opening and closing vertically. Your items coming out of the washer are going to be hot to the touch. You are also going to be potentially using a variety of different cleaning chemistries with this washer. So please be aware of all safety precautions. Follow all your personal, use of personal protective equipment when working around this kind of an environment. That being said, what we'll do is we'll become familiar with the washer itself, and I'll introduce you to the washer. Obviously, we have a wash chamber. Inside the chamber, there are these slots that we'll be using for the different accessories that we have available for use in the washer. We have a control printer assembly. Behind the printer door is an on-off switch for putting the washer into standby. We also have a rocker switch that we can use for printing of the current readings from the temperature probes and I'll pull this out. We can take a look at what the current temperature is in the sump of the washer, in what we call the pure water tank, and also what the temperature probe is currently reading that would be monitoring the drying temperature during the drying phase of the cycle. These give you real-time values when you look at this printout. The printer that we use is a thermal style of printer, so your standard thermal printer paper will work with this type of a printer. And I will review the process for changing out paper shortly. Close this door. Directly below the actual door itself is the control panel itself. We'll spend a few minutes right now going through each one of these row of switches and what they are responsible for doing. The very first switch is what we call cycle menu. When I push this switch, this will allow me to cycle through the variety of cycles that we have set up on this machine. There are 3 factory default settings. There's a light, medium, and heavily soiled cycles that the customer can choose from to start with. I recommend that folks become familiar with these factory default settings and then modifying these particular cycles to their needs. For the majority of processing of glassware in a laboratory setting, general purpose lab, these 3 cycles will provide you all the necessary processing that you need for thorough cleaning and drying of your items. In this case, the next switch over is what we call the select cycle switch. I use this button to toggle through the cycles available on this particular screen's worth of cycles. So again, if I want the light cycle, what I simply do is I toggle through until the cursor for the light cycle starts to turn on and off. If I want to review a particular cycle and the parameters that make up that cycle, I simply take the cycle that is currently blinking, I hit the review cycle button, and I will be able to review the parameters that make up that particular cycle. In this case, there is a pre-wash cycle of a recirculated time of 1 minute using cold tap water. Wash number 1, or in this case I can set up a couple of wash phases if I'd like, very much like a washing machine at home where you may have 1 wash phase, you empty the dirty water and then fill the sump with clean water again for a second wash phase. That would be needed if you had very soiled items. But in this particular case, the factory default setting up is 1 wash cycle with a recirculation time of 2 minutes. We're going to use hot water that's going to be heated to 150 degrees. So in this particular case, my 2-minute countdown timer will not begin timing out until we achieve 150 degree temperature. What we're talking about with pump number 1, this is the chemical pump, and there are 3 different chemical pumps on this washer that the customer can use for a variety of different cleaning chemistries. Currently there are none selected, so at the appropriate time when the end users do move into the facility, they can contact our formulated chemistries representative, a gentleman by the name of John Frana, and I'll have his contact information available at the end of this in-service.
Where will those chemicals be stored?
Those chemicals, it's really going to be up to the end users. They come in a variety of sizes. Typical sizes are going to be 5-gallon containers. They could simply just fit right in this area right here. There are pickup tubes that we've currently, if you want to step back here, we've left the pickup tubes wrapped up until the chemicals have been selected. We have an actual pickup tube itself, and then we have a low-level indicator. As you can see, it's nothing more than a float switch with it's a magnetic reed switch. It's currently taped in a closed position for right now. Again, we leave these wrapped up until at such a time when people move in and they'll actually start using the equipment. Once we have we know who the people are that are going to be using the equipment, that's an ongoing consumable purchase. So we don't want to dictate to them what they're going to use or not use yet. So that's something that will come later.
And looked like there were 2 feeds back there.
There's 2 feeds and there's a 3rd pump that's currently available. Quite frankly, most people are only going to use either an alkaline or an acid, one or the other, maybe both, but it's rare they would use anything more than that. But the 3rd pump is there in case it's needed.
Thank you.
Okay. Right now, the default injection time of 45 seconds relates to a dilution factor of a half an ounce per gallon. So half an ounce of detergent for every gallon of water that we fill the sump with. And the sump on this particular washer holds about 13 gallons of water. That water is emptied between phases. There's a mechanical assist pump that's used to pump the water out of the sump. And then once that phase of the cycle is complete, we then fill the sump for the next phase of the cycle. So continuing on with the review of our cycle, we now have our very first rinse recirculated water for a period of 1 minute using just simple hot tap water. In this case, because we believe there would have been detergent, we'll use a second rinse to assure that we are getting a good thorough rinse of detergent so that there's no residue left over behind on the glassware of detergent. Again, that's hot tap water recirculated for 1 minute. And then finally, we're using pure water. It's being introduced from, I believe, an RO or a deionized feed.
Right.
Is it RO?
It's RO right now.
So they're using the RO loop in the building. And in this case, we store the tank, the pure water, in a holding tank that's heated. And in this case, it's non-recirculated for 10 seconds. It's very much where it's a single pass of water over our items. We don't need a great length of time. What we're using the pure water rinse for is to help assure that we don't have any hard water residual left over on our items that are being processed. So once that water comes in, it simply goes straight to the drain. And then we refill that pure water tank and start the process again of heating it. And typically between the time the tank fills till the next time it's needed, we've had plenty of time for that water to heat back up.
And that's a plastic tank.
That's a stainless steel tank with a stainless steel heating element in it. Because of that aggressive nature of the RO water, we definitely use stainless steel in this case. Finally, I set this up and I'll show you how to modify during the course of the in-service, where I show how to make modifications to cycle parameters. Drawing is one that we typically find more often than not people wanting to be able to modify. So that's one of the things that I'll show you how to modify. It's not to say that that's not the only thing you can modify. For a complete list of those parameters that can be modified, how to change cycle parameters, how to build a cycle, again, I would refer to the operator's manual for complete description how to do that. Finally, the dry cooling time. In this case, that's the time that we're allowing items to initially cool down at the end of the drying phase. That's a period of 1 minute. At the end of that 1 minute period, we'll get a complete buzzer and then we'll be able to open the door. Now, at the end of reviewing the cycle, I have the option of printing the cycle values by either hitting the review button again for yes. If I hit the stop button, means no, I don't want to print out the cycle values. And of course, the next two buttons over, there's the start button. Now you'll notice that just because I hit the start button once, the cycle does not begin. This is a built-in safety. It's basically an "are you sure" type of a question. If this is the cycle you want to run, within 5 seconds of hitting that button, I need to hit that button a second time in order to actually start the cycle. At any time during the course of a cycle, I can hit the stop button. For instance, if I notice an item has fallen off one of the spindles, or let's say the spindle arm is not moving, and there is a spindle arm I'll show you inside the chamber of the washer here in a minute, I can stop the cycle so I can safely open the door, reposition the load, close the door, and restart the cycle right from where it was at. It simply pauses the cycle. It won't send it right back to the very beginning of the cycle, unless, of course, I want to hit the reset button. And so basically it's a stop. If I hit it a second time, it's a reset. If I hit the extended cycle, and very few, if ever, is there a reason for extending a phase of the cycle, that's what extend cycle will do. And during that particular phase that it's currently in, if you hit the extend cycle button, it will extend the cycle. I believe it adds about one more minute to that phase of the cycle itself. Alarm reply, just as the name implies, if for whatever reason there is an alarm, and I'll give a description of that and show you how this works in a minute, you're able to hit the alarm reply so that you turn off the audible alarm. And in any case where we have an alarm situation, we'll get a visual display, we'll get a printout, and we'll get the audible alarm. and you have to hit the alarm reply in order to silence the alarm. Button right next to it is the door open button. We are using pneumatics. There is an air compressor in this unit. As you can see, it's a vertical sliding door. Inside is our processing chamber. In this particular case, we currently only have 3 washing accessories. You may notice that there's an empty slot. I can add this additional accessory that would allow for a 4th accessory to be used. And in order to put this into position, I line this up, typically right from the back to begin with. And push that straight in. And now we'd have a position for a 4th accessory. Now, the reason why it's handy to have this removed, and in order to remove it, you simply push up, or, I'm sorry, there we go. You push down, and you can pull this right back down. I'll set this aside. Be aware there may be water in that accessory, so there again, if the floor gets wet, it might not be a bad idea if they put down some type of wet mats in front of this washer. Say for instance, I use this particular washing accessory. You'll notice that because I've got taller items, this would be the perfect place to set that accessory, leaving these 2 positions open for my shorter items.
So you should load it up outside, and then
Not necessarily.
that cart doesn't necessarily line up with the height of that box.
Yeah, right now this still needs to be adjusted. We have to have our, we'll have our service folks make the adjustment on this cart. It's really an operator's choice whether or not they want to use the cart. Typically they'll want to at the very least use it for the items that are underneath this center guide right here. All right. We also have an area, as you can see, the nice thing on this 2-level cart is that there is a slot for storage on the cart itself.
So does that basket slide in, or does it have to be on, is it all integral to that?
Now, that basket is designed, as a matter of fact, one of the things you may have noticed, each of these rail assemblies has a manifold or a riser valve. So instead of having, in this particular case, you'll notice that there is a rotary arm located right here, but its main purpose is to be able to spray down on the items below. By using what we call a bottom rotary spray head, I can put this in, and now not only do I have the spray arm in the ceiling that's going to spray down, but I also have the spray arm that's going to be spraying up, so we get full washing action and coverage of the entire load for our general purpose items. One other thing you may have noticed in this general purpose basket, this is nothing more than a hold down screen, so if they have very loose items like bottle caps, small bottle caps, they can simply place those inside the basket. Use the hold down screen to keep them from coming out of position.
Great. Okay.
So a couple of things that I'll point out here, again, talking about safety. We'll notice that if, for instance, say this was out of position, you'll notice that the accessories are designed so that as the wheels roll into place, they'll fall directly into their slots and into position. Well, let's say, for instance, somebody happens to leave the accessory hanging out and accidentally closes the door. There's a built-in pressure switch that rides underneath this grommet right here, this seal. You'll notice that I'm getting the alarm that the door was obstructed. We also got the printout. And in this case, what I'll do is I'll hit the alarm reply. And this one's relatively straightforward. The idea is that I need to just simply position the accessory back into place before I attempt to close the door again. Same old's true if you were to close the door. Again, you want to watch for pinch points, and there again, that goes back to the safety precautions for working around this door. Okay. From an operator standpoint, maintenance-wise, and it's a good idea to do this when the washer is first started up at the beginning of the day while the machine is still cool. What we recommend doing is doing a visual inspection of the screens that are designed to collect any foreign objects such as broken glass that may occur. And one of the things that the folks that are going to be using the washer never want to do not run the washer without these screens in place. Now there is an order that those screens can replace, and what I'll do is I'm going to take them out, and I'm going to position them on the floor so you can see what, as far as the proper positioning of these screens. You'll notice there's a lip that goes all the way around this screen. The middle screen has a lip that goes around the entire perimeter. Finally, the outside screen, or the one that's closest to the door, will fit in as so. So when the screens are positioned properly over the sump, that's how they'll look. And they'll give a good, complete seal and prevent any glassware from going down into the screen, or down into the sump. A last line of defense against broken items. This one's a little bit more difficult to see. But there is another secondary screen that's located at the back of the sump. And again, the idea is what we're doing is we're recirculating water back into this sump through this screen filter and then back inside. And so you'll notice there is the primary and then secondary screens. And this one fits all the way in the very back. Very difficult to see, but again, that will be positioned. And that screen just simply pushes back into place. You notice that we have our electric heating elements. Again, very important to watch out. I would recommend doing this with the machine turned off. Again, doing it while it's cool. That needs to be done as needed. I'd recommend a visual inspection, a minimum of once a week, and then cleaning out the screens as needed. Putting the screens back in, I simply start with the back screen first. Slide that into place. My screw screen. This one in, I simply lift up and we'll put this back into place. So we'll go ahead and we'll close the door.
Does that top door have to be closed for the machine to work or not?
No, but there is, when you open up this top piece right here, what's going to happen is that's going to block the pathway to the door. So if you're going to take this top off, it's designed so that you can lift it up like the hood of the car. By the way, that's where we do have the marine light assembly. It's just a 6-watt fluorescent bulb for energy conservation purposes. That's all we need. That's where you would change out that bulb. You can also access the pressure regulator for the air compressor, the peristaltic pumps that are used for the chemical injection are also located behind this door as well. Now the one nice thing about the washer itself, it does come with a 1-year parts and labor warranty, and we do have 2 service representatives locally here in town. From a facility standpoint, how do you want the end users to handle warranty calls on the equipment?
They'll probably be calling me and then I'll forward that on to you.
Okay. So in that event, what you'll want to do is there is the 800 number for calling Steris service.
Okay.
you will notice that when I turn off the control, and if I turn it back on, just give it a second or two, when the control itself is booting back up, one of the very first things it's going to do is it's going to print off the serial number.
Okay.
So you'll want the serial number of
Right.
the washer. You call in through the 800 number, refer to the serial number, and they'll automatically know where it's at and who should be coming out. We do have 2 service representatives that live up in the Salt Lake City area, Brett Wright and Adam Kent. I believe Adam Kent is your primary technician, and Brett Wright will be the backup in the event Adam's out. In this case, this week he is out. Adam is going through some additional service training right now. So. As far as the actual modification of cycle parameters, and this is a good example of this bottom row of buttons. And typically what we recommend is once the cycle parameters have been set up, it's kind of a set it and forget it kind of thing. What we'll recommend doing is that folks print out a final copy of the cycle parameters and then hold on to those. In the event memory was ever lost on the control, or somebody, accidentally changed cycle parameters and they didn't know what they did, you've always got a template to refer back to as far as the parameters are concerned. So in this particular case, right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the dry parameters. Now I'm not even going to say the light cycle, I'm going to take the medium cycle because I've already made some basic changes. I'll show you what the default settings are, and then why some of the changes may need to be made for the dry cycle. So let's say we want to go to the medium cycle and we want to change or modify the cycle. In this case, CVTP stands for Change Values Touchpad. SVTP, Save Values Touchpad. You never want to hit the Save Values button, or otherwise you completely erase that cycle, okay? There is a way of setting up all the factory default settings again, but that's only in the service mode. So in this case, we're simply going to hit the Change Values button. The very first thing that we could modify is the cycle name. So for instance, if we wanted to call it small glassware, we could go ahead and make those changes. And one of the things you'll notice is that by using the values or the cursor is how we change over to whichever one of the characters that we want to change. We're going to go now and we're going to modify the cycle. In this case, I want to modify the dry phase. Now I can use my value keys and I could scroll all the way through the various phases of the cycle, or I could just simply hit the down arrow and that'll take me to the dry phase. Once I know this is the phase I want to change, I use the Change Values button again to now enter into the items I want to change. In this case, the drying time is set for 15 minutes at a temperature of 240 degrees. Now, if the customer is going to be running any kind of plastics, this may be a little too warm of a temperature. So the dry time, we're just going to keep that as is. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the temperature and I'm going to reduce that down to 200 degrees. So once I've done that, I can now hit Save Values, and if I want to confirm that the changes have held, simply hit the review cycle. And voila. Drying temperature.
Where's the element for that? Is it the same one that heats the water?
That is located behind this panel. Open this up. We're just using a heating ribbon for air It's located, and then of course the air is being recirculated through here. One other thing you may also notice about this washer, you'll notice that there is no hard duct connection to the washer itself. We're using a cold water condenser that will take all the vapor inside the chamber, and it will condense it, and it goes down the drain. It just mixes with cold water. This is one thing that's very important to point out to folks. They're going to be able, this is a piece of safety glass. It's going to feel cold to the touch. When you look inside the actual processing chamber itself during the course of a cycle, you may not necessarily notice steam or hot vapor. But at the end of the cycle, they open the door. Or during a cycle and they have to pause the cycle and open the door to make an adjustment. It could be during a phase of the cycle that's extremely hot. For instance, the wash phase, where again, we're heating the water up to 150 degrees. Right now, I can tell you that the pure water tank, the water that's being held in there, is currently at 180 degrees. So there are some very hot temperatures in there. Again, when folks are dealing with the glassware that's inside the glassware washer, especially if they're not sure if it's gone through a process cycle or not, and they weren't the ones who actually loaded the cycle, very important, regardless, to wear your personal protective wear to prevent against burns. Also, we don't want folks slipping. So again, a good idea to put down a mat to, for that. Watch your pinch points. Again, we're working around 3-phase electricity. We also have a 120 volt control circuit for the air compressor. Eventually they may be using chemicals. So all of these things are really important that the folks understand that they're, the safety guidelines. Very important, if for some reason you're not going to be using, say that the folks that are using the washer decided they don't have enough glassware to fill the third slot. They just want to do some large glassware. And then they also want to do some general purpose items. Even though this position is not being used, it's very important to keep the accessory header in place to level out the balance of water pressure throughout the other two accessories. Okay. Let's go ahead and talk about changing the paper for a minute. In this case, like any other printer paper, you'll get the red ribbon that indicates that you're running low on paper. Again, how much paper will be used just is going to determine on how many cycles you're going to be using. So it's more of a trend type of a thing that's going to make that determination how often that they'll need to keep paper on hand. Again, the nice thing is it is thermal calculator paper, so that can be just bought off the shelf as needed. To change the paper itself, what you'll do is you would just simply rip through what remaining paper may be there. You'll notice that there is a take-up spool. It's a motorized take-up spool. And just let that remaining paper just wind its way up. In this case, it's a 2-piece spool. Now, the nice thing about this is it makes it easy to take the paper off the spool. You'll notice that there is a slot, and it's a keyed spool. If you look right there, I know it's a little difficult to see, but there's the key. If I let this plate go, there's a micro switch behind this plate that controls the tension motor on the take-up spool. So once we've built up enough tension, obviously it's going to pull that plate all the way in. It's going to stop the motor. Now what I would do is this, if I know my paper's right empty, I'll make sure I grab a hold of my spool. I'm going to rip whatever remaining paper I have, and at a 45-degree angle, I'll pull out the remaining paper, and I only like to pull out 1 inch or 2 of paper at a time because I don't want to jam up those
Right.
printer assemblies. They're somewhat delicate, you know, they can break down. So, or they can just jam right up. Now, you'll notice there is a printer head. So, when I am putting the new roll of paper in, what I like to do is I like to tear the paper at a little bit of an angle so that the long end of the paper is going to be avoiding the printer head as I'm putting it in. And just as it indicates on this plate right here, we're going to feed the paper from underneath. So as I put the new roll of paper in, it feeds from underneath. I have my spool, set that into place. I'm going to take my paper, I'm going to start threading the paper into the mechanical feed. And if I want, I can turn off the printer. I've got so much paper through here. I can now start feeding it the rest of the way, being careful with the printer head, and again at a 45-degree angle.
If you yank down on that, you'll damage the print head.
Exactly.
Okay.
Then I feed it through the plate. There's a spring clip that I use just to push that back into place. Now, if I want to make sure that the printer itself is actually working, I can hit print. Sure enough, it is working. And finally, what I do is I'll have my take-up spool ready. Feed my paper through the guide. I find my spool, and just that cutout in the spool. I'll feed this over the top. There's the keyed section, and I'll wait here for a second. I'll let the take-up spool, the second half of the take-up spool, work its way back around. And there's the key. Slide that back into place. Let it go, and we're good to go.
So you push the door to stop the...
Yeah, exactly. The micro switch is right behind that plate. Exactly. Now there were a couple of other things I'll point out. Cycle menu, you will notice that these first 3 cycles, again, they're the factory default settings. Currently, cycle 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are all empty cycles. There's nothing there right now. They're just wide open. So they could build a cycle as needed. And again, when the folks start moving back into the lab area and they do start using the washer, I'm available as needed. Even though I live down in San Antonio, I'll make arrangements accordingly to come back out for training. Typically that's, you know, like once a year or so, especially in a new facility like this. But if more training's needed, and again, we have resources right here in town with our service folks who will be more than happy to answer basic questions as well.
The manual's online if they want to read it.
Yeah, I've got a PDF version of that. I believe we turned it in PDF as part of the closeout documents. There is the hard copy of the manual that's located right here. And again, if end users need it, I always have a PDF version on my computer. I can always email that out as needed. But moving on, continue, you will notice there were 2 last cycles. It's one called descaler and one called prime. The descaler cycle would be used, I'm not sure, what's the water quality like?
It's pretty hard around
Is it
here.
hard here?
Yeah.
Okay. As needed. The descaler cycle is a special cycle that what it will do, it's a shortened version of a standard processing cycle, but in this particular case, and you'll have to follow the instructions for the descaler cycle in the book, if you select to run a descaler cycle, it will fill with water, and then at the appropriate time you're going to get an audible alarm that's going to indicate that it's time for you to open the door and to pour a measured amount of liquid descaler into and mixing with the water of the sump. And it'll recirculate that descaler, and it'll go through the appropriate phases to properly descale and rinse out any residual descaler. Okay?
And that's available through Steers?
That's available through Steris. One other thing that folks can do, if they're going to be running any kind of acid cycles basically a descaler. So then it becomes a moot point. You probably won't ever have to do it. And then occasionally you could just simply run an acid cycle where you're injecting the acid detergent instead of an alkaline. The most common detergent that we find most folks using in lab settings is an alkaline. But every now and then, depending on what kind of processes or chemicals that they're going to be using, or the kind of soils that they need to clean, will dictate whether or not they need an acid or not. Finally, the prime, and we'll do this once the chemical is purchased. It's nothing more than, because we're using the peristaltic type of pumps, you have to prime the pump. So that's all that is. And it's a very simple process. We simply come over here, we select prime. I would hit start. Which one of the pumps do I want to prime? So once I know which one I want to prime, and now you can even hear that pump. Okay. So we would hold on to this, and then we would be able to see the detergent coming in along the side wall. Generally speaking, once the line's been primed, unless for some reason somebody runs the bottle completely empty and the line empty, chances are you will only have to prime it initially.
Will that float valve make an audible alarm when it senses?
Yes,
okay.
Yes it will. They'll get an alarm indicating what's going on, which one of the chemicals, pump number 1 or pump number 2 is empty.
Okay.
Is there a tube on the pump that needs to be changed that gets flat after a while, or?
It can be changed, and if it needs to be changed, our service personnel will do that as part of either under warranty, or if you decide eventually to put the equipment under preventative maintenance, strictly you all's call. But that's something that you can discuss with our service personnel as needed.
So plastics, glass, anything they can't put in there?
Yep, they can put whatever they want. The nice thing about the washers, you will notice, they can run a mix of items in the same cycle. Generally speaking, the cycles that they're going to set up, they're not too harsh for anything. The one point that I always like to make, though, is the temperature for dry. Because if there's one area that we do find that things are delicate towards, it's going to be the temperature of the drying phase. And so that's why I like to be able to point that out immediately, is how folks can set up the dry phase on a cycle. Finally, if for whatever reason the machine has a problem, water is leaking, obviously they'll want to get in touch with facilities. I don't even know if you want them knowing where the disconnect valves are, the people that are going to be using the
Yeah, they
washer.
probably won't need to know that.
Okay, all right. The one thing I will point out, the electrical disconnect for the washer is located on the wall, and I believe this is the air compressor.
It is.
Okay. So, if either way out.
Should they put it in standby at the end of the day, or just leave it on all
What
the
I
time?
recommend folks doing is putting it in standby over weekends, and if they know it's going to be a long period of time in between use. What will happen, and this is where I'll end the in-service here today, when I put the machine into standby, you're going to notice that it's telling me it will go into a standby cycle in the next 50 some odd seconds. All this is we're going to empty the holding tanks for the pure water. We'll also make sure that the sump is empty. We don't want standing water that could potentially have microbial growth. We don't want to promote that. So by putting it in standby, we're going to empty out.
So it'll flush.
It'll flush out. And we'll let this run through the standby cycle so you won't really see anything happening. But the one good thing it's important to be able to point out is at the end of the standby cycle, the display will go to the time and date. So whenever somebody comes in, they see the time and date, they realize they need to take the machine out and stand by this. So, for the next 2 minutes, there we go.
See, it's pretty hot.
Yes. And now you'll notice, what's interesting, now you can see a little bit of vapor there now.
It's flowing down the side.
Yep. By the way, we do use cold water for cooling effluent.
Good water stored in there.
Here we go. Yeah, again, there's a good 12 to 13 gallons worth of water in that in the pure water holding tank. And we have about 1 more minute. Just going to confirm everything empties out. Now the one thing, and I believe so the door will open. The other thing, when folks are opening and closing the door, that's one other thing I'll point out. You don't want to stand directly in front of the door as you're opening the door, because otherwise the vapor can come right into your face. So stand off to one side when you're opening or closing, especially opening up the door itself. In this case, what I want to do, so again, if folks need to get in contact with me, my name is Don Bebel. My cell phone number is area code 210-865-4912. Feel free to call me at any time if I can be of assistance with setting up site parameters, or if you need to make arrangements for some additional training down the line, I'll be more than happy to make those arrangements. And that ends my portion of the training. Thank you.